diary of a sociopathic mother-in-law next door. Today's date is... What is today's date? Saturday, the 20th of December 2025. Nearly the solstice, where the sun stays still for 3 days, like it's dead, and then rises again on the 25th, like it's born again. So, where are we? Right, so we're just going to delve into the possible kind of, what has actually gone on between the husk and roadkill for her to end up taking her on her holiday with her husband in the Lake District over Christmas, over the actual Christmas period. How's this manifested? So the first thing to remember is the abuse, the emotional abuse, the emotional neglect suffered by the beacon. I've said this before, say it again. She's not being singled out for that abuse. Everybody gets it. Everybody gets their own little cycle of abuse. So, roadkill, through lies and manipulation, just like she did to our daughter when she was around about 11, where she lied to her about why she moved here. Remember, I only moved here to see you more. It's an absolute lie. It's a semi-truth, as in it would have been one of the benefits. But that's not how she's put it to an 11-year-old child. You sick, twisted sociopath. Now imagine if our daughter was a weak little child like she is. How would our daughter cope with that guilt? It's guilt and shame. I've done something wrong. I'm not going to see her enough. I should be more loyal to me grandma above myself and my friends. I've done something wrong, and then there must be something wrong with me. She's saying this to us. Must be something wrong with us if I can't get this right. They're the potential thoughts and emotions of a child who's being manipulated and abused in that way. She's sick. So you tell me that she hasn't done it to roadkill over the 47 years she's been on the planet. But she hasn't done that, has she? She's left her alone, and she's brought her up properly and give her a stable, loving, emotional, supportive, validating upbringing. Yeah, right. So I believe that roadkill, she's had the golden child version, and that's the one where you pretty much wrap them in cotton wool, make them feel you heavily reward them for being obedient, make them feel like they're special, more special than the other child. But the cycle of abuse is the same. So the cycle of the abuse is tension building, or idealisation. You're building somebody up and being super nice to them, and then the manipulation. So you've built them up, and then the manipulation and the lies and the derogatory comments start to come. Just little things like, what did you do that for? Oh, no, I don't like that. And you basically just, think of it as belittling. And if the victim says anything, then they just downplay the abuse. Hiya. They downplay the abuse. You're too sensitive. That's not what I meant. I didn't say that. You're remembering it wrong. But the victim has this deep sense of, like, an emotional scar, and they can't stand up for themselves. And eventually it starts to eat away at their self-esteem, their sense of self-worth. And then there'll be a period of silence, the silent treatment, which is where I'll just get past this. Hello.
Hello there.
Are you all right?
Yes, fine.
I'm a bit late today, but I think I'll just make it.
You're going to be pushing it because it is
I
really
know.
quite grim today, isn't it?
We are nearly at the shortest day, though, aren't we?
Yeah, I know.
And then
What? I know it's getting over.
we'll make the turn.
If I don't see you, have a great Christmas.
Yes, and you have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye. The silent treatment. So this is where it could be total silent treatment, or just going cold, making the victim feel like they've done something wrong, really have done something wrong. There's no communication because the victims can't stand up to the bully, in other words. And it might be things like passive aggressive actions, like answering texts but not putting the two little kisses on the end. So putting 2 kisses on every single text, even when it's not required, is the manipulator's it's kind of probably one of the easiest tactics to spot. They put it on every single message, and then when you've pissed them off, they're still speaking to you, but they don't put the kisses on. So they've got plausible deniability. Well, I am speaking to you. No, but why? What's wrong with you? Nothing. What do you mean? Oh, you didn't put 2 kisses on. Sounds childish, doesn't it? Nobody really says that because it is childish. But that's what she's doing. And even if you did challenge her, she would say, "Well, I just forgot." Plausible deniability, but it's passive aggression. It's letting somebody know that you're not happy, and it's another form of abuse, especially in the. I'm just gonna be mean to this person, even though I'm that parent figure. You're abusing your perceived authority. So the silent treatment, it could just be those sorts of tactics. Doesn't mean that they actually ignore you. Might do. Might. So sometimes she doesn't respond to a text for a while. And that's another way. Just letting you know, anything which is out of habit, that's the way you've got to look at this. When somebody's displaying behaviours which are out of their normal habit, then something's up, and they're doing it intentionally because it's not them. i.e. they're not doing it naturally, they're making an intentional effort to behave in a different way. It's passive aggression. A lot of insecure people are like that. So, and then once that silent treatment has done the job, i.e. the person is so confused and don't understand, questioning their own reality. I haven't done anything wrong. No, you haven't done anything wrong. But that's the way they make them feel. And then they start to question themselves and their own self-worth. And then when the abuser, when the abuser thinks that they've done enough of that, they've got to be careful, because they don't want to scare the person off. They don't want them to see it. So it's like leaving a hook dangling. Got to, once the bite, you've got to get it out, because it might realise it's been fed a yarn. Don't even know if that's a good metaphor, but so the silent treatment, the cold shoulder, lasts for however long, depending on the control dynamics in that relationship, and then she'll bring them back online by being super nice. It's called hoovering or love bombing, and this just snaps like out of nowhere. They're really, really nice, really complimentary, and making you feel good about yourself. And it does two things, well, probably just more than two, but in the main, huge amount of relief for the victim. The real her's back. And the other thing, it makes them want to please them more, because they want to avoid the circle. Obviously it's horrible, the circle of abuse. It's horrible. So deep down they know, don't want to go through that again. It's awful. I want to keep me real mum. And when she's building me self-esteem, making me feel good about myself, because that's what a mum should be. So what they do is, the victim goes the extra mile to please them. And this creates the codependent relationship. The abuser relies on the victim for a sense of control and power and false sense of worth or self-esteem. It's all false, it's based on power and control. But then the victim relies on the abuser, because these periods of when they're nice and complimentary, and it's obviously all fake, but that nice period, it's love bombing, because it's quite overwhelming, and you probably don't get that from all peer groups, your work colleagues, your blogs in the pub. So you feel like you bond to that, and that's the bit that you think is the real person. And obviously you want to believe that that's the real person. There's 4 stages. There's four different personalities to choose from. 4 different behaviours. Why on earth would you choose the other one? Is it your mother? So she chooses Roadkill chooses the nice one and bonds to that. It's a trauma bond. And what happens is this cycle goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on, never stops. And eventually what happens is the victim becomes so demoralized subconsciously that they become so dependent on the abuser that they will probably have very small to no circles of real friends, because obviously what the abuser wants is isolation. Once they're isolated, they're trapped. And this doesn't happen overnight. It happens over a long period of time, but they're patient. You give these bastards their due. These sociopaths. They're patient. Because obviously they're getting food along the way. The journey is enjoyable for them. They don't necessarily want it to end. Happy for it to go slow. So the victim becomes so demoralised, with such low self-esteem, low self-worth, kind of detached from any independence, and the true person inside doesn't grow. There's a false self that's actually been created by the abuse and the trauma, and that new identity is an absolute slave to the abuser, and they don't know it, i.e. the victim doesn't know it, they can't see it, they just live for the scraps, those scraps of the nice part of the circle, and they've become so compliant to the abuser that those periods might even last a longer time, because once the abuser has got the victim trapped right in the centre of the web, they don't need to run the cycle at the same intensity. It's almost like job's done. It's not done, it's never done, because the victim can always escape, but the cycle is less intense. And this is why the roadkill, she's never going to see it on the same level that the beacon is. We tried to explain to her, because she would just not see it at all. But she's blind to it as well, because nobody wants to admit that they've been duped into an abusive, codependent relationship, and that their own mother is actually a sociopath. Who the hell wants to admit that to themselves? So the mind goes into self-preservation mode and will block out any information which is likely to cause severe cognitive dissonance. So, and her level of awareness will be so low that she just won't be able to see the bigger picture from a higher level of awareness, because victims, once they get down to this level of awareness or consciousness, with such low self-esteem, they can't see the bigger picture. They're not capable of pattern recognition, joining dots, seeing repetitive themes play out. And that level of consciousness is survival consciousness. It's rooted in base consciousness, which is the lower part of your brain, which is our complex survival, and the only emotions that she has, I'm still on roadkill here, are those emotions required for survival. And the ego, when the ego identifies with the survival part of the brain, forgetting what I was going to say, it's compliant. It's the compliant part of the brain, the ego-based consciousness, are complex. When this part of the brain is governing in the main people's behaviours and how they think, it's compliant. And because when you think about it, compliance equals safety, and survival, self-preservation is all about safety. That's what that part of the brain is for. You see danger, you get the hell out of dodge, or you fight or flee. Survival. So when an authority figure or an abuser comes along, somebody who you believe you are lesser than because you've got no self-worth, you become very compliant. Just tell me what to do to keep you happy. Husk. And it's not capable of pattern recognition. It's not what that part of the brain is for. It's not there to philosophise and have morals. Nobody thinks about morals when they're being chased through the jungle by a tiger. You don't stop and try and reason with the tiger. That's where reason comes from. It comes from the higher part of the brain. Reasonable. And trying to reason with somebody. And you can't reason with the husk because she's in exactly the same place in terms of her level of consciousness. They're actually in the same place. And one, it's a hierarchy, and one's at the top, obviously, and one's at the bottom. Husk's at the top, but they're at the same base level of consciousness. So what I say for one applies to them both. The difference is the control is being given to the husk, and roadkill is completely subservient and compliant, and that's why she's got no boundaries, and she can't say no, because if she says no or puts up a boundary, he says no, that's not reasonable to ask us to do that. If she puts up a boundary, then she gets the abuse cycle, and she doesn't want to go through that because it's hell. She's been through it for 47 years. She's completely broken. She's got no friends. Her demeanour is depressing. Her energy levels are at rock bottom. You can feel the low, heavy vibration slowly transmitting from a broken brain. Harsh? Well, it's about time you woke up and smelled the coffee, because you're an enabler. So the power structure is husk is the master, and roadkill is the slave. And these levels of consciousness are rooted in guilt and shame. Because it's been done to them, that's the sad thing. Obviously it's been done to roadkill by a mother, but this has been done to, somebody's done it to the husk when she was the same age. You know, somebody's done the same thing to her. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. You just need to look at the parents and wow, I can see it. She is her mother. So anyway, this level of consciousness is rooted in guilt and shame, but because of the abuse and the trauma, nobody should have abuse and trauma like that when they're a kid. Don't have the tools and the faculties to deal with it. Obviously they haven't matured into emotionally matured into a fully grown adult. Nobody should do that to a kid. So what happens is, if they're made to feel guilt and shame, they can't deal with it. They go into a massive episode of self-loathing, and this can be done over time when they're through the cycle. They go into a huge pit of self-loathing, and what they do with that self, they lock it away. I think I might have said this. They lock that away and they create a new identity. And that's what the child does. And 9 times out of 10, because it's in survival mode, it'll identify with the ego. And the ego can't go through the adolescence phase of maturing mentally, emotionally. The ego can't do that. The ego can't grow. Obviously, it's the oldest part of our brain. It's what, the Neanderthals would have had for pure survival instincts only. That can't grow. What differentiates us from Neanderthals is obviously the human brain, the neocortex, and that's the bit that develops and grows during and comes online during adolescence. So the ego can't go through adolescence. So they stay in this mental state where they can't deal with guilt and shame, but they're still rooted in it because that child they've locked away, it's not going anywhere. It's still there. It's just being covered up with a facade. And if they ever feel guilt and shame, it'll trigger the trauma of childhood and how that felt as a child. It doesn't do that to me, guilt and shame, because I know how to deal with it. And when you do deal with it, it certainly serves as a lesson never to make that mistake again, because obviously they're powerful emotions, powerful negative emotions. So anyway, they'll do anything to avoid guilt and shame, and that's what makes them look shameless. That's what makes them come across as they've got no remorse, because they are rooted in it, but they can't deal with it. So they have to attach to the ego, because the ego thinks it's perfect. The ego's never wrong. That's why I can't reason with these people. Never wrong. So that's how it all works. And I feel sorry for them both. Not for the adult, for that locked away little child. I feel sorry for that child. I feel deeply, deeply, deeply sorry for that child. But not the adults. Because they can change this. They can change it. Traumatic. But you've got to go through adolescence. And that's why I see it. I see it as like a late stage adolescence. That's what adolescents are doing. They're discovering their true identity. It's not their ego. So this whole Christmas holiday and roadkill taking the husk, this is how I see this. This is my theory on how it's played out. Roadkill can't deal with the awkwardness of Christmas. Whose house is she going to go to? What's it going to be like? Saying, oh, where have you been? Oh, I've been to Beacons. And having to put up with the cold shoulder from her mother. She can't cope with that. It's too traumatic, and she knows it's coming. She knows it's coming, and she can't deal with confrontation because, again, the golden child is wrapped in cotton wool and never allowed to grow. So she doesn't want to deal with the awkwardness of Christmas Day. So she's running away, just like the husk did for 8 weeks. She's running away so she doesn't have to face it. Because like all of these people in base consciousness are cowards. They've got no self-esteem, which means they've got no self-respect. Of course they've got no self-respect, because that's why they've got no boundaries. You can't have self-respect and no boundaries. Don't go together. And every time you go back for more roadkill, what you're saying to your deeper true self that's locked away, I don't care about you anymore. I'm going back for more of this abuse. That little child that's locked away is getting more and more and more and more diminished. So anyway, she's running away at Christmas. That's what roadkill's doing. And she'll have been at the husk's house, and the husk would have said, "Oh, what are you doing? Christmas then?" And, "Oh, we're going away. We're going away to the lakes, just me and my husband, like we sometimes do, because we like our privacy." And the husk will have just said, "Oh, who am I going to see then? Guilt. You're going to see nobody, husk. And that's your fault. You are the architect of your own world. You, nobody else. You deal with the guilt, but you can't. So what these people have to do is, when there's potential guilt, they have to dump it somewhere else. So they've got no guilt, they've got no shame. They have to dump those two things on other people. So she's dumping her guilt onto roadkill by making her feel guilty for going away. And then roadkill can't deal with the guilt, because she can't deal with guilt, and she certainly can't deal with the cold shoulder. Imagine she texts the husk on Christmas Day while she's in the lakes. "Hiya husk, hiya ma'am, happy Christmas." She'll get one of those replies with no kisses on it. And she knows it's coming. Subconsciously, she knows it's coming. And she can't deal with the guilt in the moment, or the potential abuse that's coming. She just make this go away. That's what she's used to. How do I make this go away? So she'll have gone home and had a conversation with her husband, and she's probably wrapped it up to make it sellable. It's not sellable. Who the hell wants to go away on holiday with a controlling sociopathic mother and a meek, compliant, passive-aggressive boyfriend? And they've got about as much life and soul as a dead fish. Who the hell wants to do that? Of course she doesn't. So she sold it to her husband. He's complied, because I believe that he's her slave. I believe that she flips into the master like her mother, because she wants to be like her mother. She admires her mother. And she flips into that mode. And I believe she does that to her husband. But more on that another time. So she's got a yes, and she's proud as punch, because now she can please her mother. But to the detriment of who? To the detriment of herself. Again, no boundaries, can't say no. And it's that little child that's locked away, is just, the message is getting through again. You don't give a shit about me, do you? She's got no self-respect. But what happens is, she's now getting rid of that guilt on behalf of the husk. So she no longer feels the guilt. It doesn't matter that she sacrificed her own happiness, like she always does. She sacrificed her own happiness to get rid of her mother's guilt. Her mother has the guilt, she passes on to her, and she needs to get rid of it. And she gets rid of it by taking advantage of her husband and having no boundaries herself. And that's how much respect she's got for her husband. So the guilt is gone. But think about it, it's been regulated. People should be able to regulate their own emotions. This guilt emotion, it hasn't been regulated by the husk in her own head. It's been dumped onto her sister, and her sister's regulated it for her. But she hasn't regulated it in her head. She's just probably dumped it onto her husband. And eventually the guilt is just, I don't know where it goes eventually. I need to think about that more. Because it's not dealt with by anybody, that's the thing. It's not actually dealt with. And then so she's her mother's emotional regulator because she's a child, because the husk is a child. They're both actually children. But the husk is a child. Now think about it, when you've got a child and they haven't gone through adolescence, they can't regulate their own emotions. That's what a parent is for. That's why you have to look after their emotional needs as much as their physical needs, because you need to help them regulate their emotions. And that's what's going on here. This is two children trying to regulate each other's emotions, and they're just making a complete fool of themselves. It's laughable when you think about it like that. Laughable. And now she's going on holiday with the husk, and she said to the beacon on the phone, "Oh, it's awkward." Yeah, I know it's awkward, because you know it's wrong. You know you're doing the wrong thing. Not just betraying your sister, but betraying yourself. And there's no bigger person you can betray. And then, but what message does it do? What message does it send to the husk? The lying husk and her lying boyfriend. She's dumped her guilt, and now she's getting rewarded. She's actually getting rewarded for her bad behaviour. It's sick. It's absolutely sick. And as far as I'm concerned, roadkill, you're sick. As in, you're ill. You're meant to be a professional, a healthcare professional, mental healthcare professional, and you're actually ill. So, and the other thing I was going to say was, so when the roadkill is carrying the guilt of the husk, she's got two options. She either does the wrong thing and bites the husk to selfishly avoid her own painful experience with the husk. So she either does the right thing and says no, or she does the wrong thing and says, "Yes, husk, come on holiday." And that's the wrong thing because of betrayal, and you shouldn't be rewarding behaviour. But when she spoke to the beacon, she said, "Oh, it's awkward." And then when she told the beacon was, "Oh, it's fine, lovely." This is what the beacon does. I think I've said this. She puts her emotions to one side, and she lets her off. She still enables the bad behaviour. She doesn't punish her sister. She doesn't hold her to account. Punish is not the right word. She doesn't hold her to account. And so when you think about it, the roadkills, she's got the guilt of the husk, she's got a decision to make, and then she might have the wrath of the beacon. So she's stuck in the middle. This is what her mother does. Puts her in the middle, golden child, and does her dirty work through her. And she's got two choices: the wrath of her mother, or being held to account by the beacon. Both of those are going to be unpleasant for somebody who can't deal with any confrontation. And she'd be left with the guilt, stuck in the middle. That's where the guilt would actually be dumped onto in that scenario. But that doesn't manifest because beacon never holds her to account. And she knows that. This is how the beacon is taken advantage of in that family. She always puts her emotions to one side And that's what her mother said, and she was right. But obviously that's changing. Certainly changed with her mother, needs to change with her sister. So the roadkill knows that the beacon will give her an easy ride, an easier ride than her mother. And that's why she chooses to then dump that guilt. In fact, that's where it ends up. It always ultimately ends up at the beacon. I'm just getting it. I forgot. Ultimately, when that's probably the only reason, was probably one of the main reasons Roadkill told her, "Oh, it's awkward. Don't worry, Roadkill. I'll take her guilt off you. It's fine." And then the beacon feels guilty for her sister being in the middle. And then, but she can process it, she can regulate it, she can make sense of it, and she might have a little bit of guilt, but it's only the amount that is her part, which is next to zero. So she deals with that emotion, and it gets released in a healthy way. That's where the guilt goes. That's where it goes. It goes back to the beacon every single time, because that's what this family do. They dump everything on her. All of their emotional baggage gets dumped on the beacon. Sick. And this is, if people can, I know this is my private or my personal story, but if people can understand what's actually going on, they'll recognise this in their own cycles, and you need the courage to walk away.